It all started 3 months ago. I'd recently graduated from a small, expensive liberal arts college. Of course, I was unemployed, my parents' patience wore thin, and I found myself being gently nudged out the door. I decided to move across the country to New York City, a place where my lofty intellect and knowledge of philosophy would be valued. I soon found out that literally no one wanted to hire a 22-year-old with a degree in philosophy. To my credit, though, I decided that I wasn't going to crawl back to my parents and beg for them to take me back in. I got a job as a busboy at a ritzy bar in Manhattan and found a small apartment in a cheap neighbourhood in Brooklyn. My roommate and I basically lived on top of each other, but it didn't really matter since we both spent most of our time working so that we could afford the ridiculous cost of living in New York City. I've never been more aware of my ordinary middle American upbringing than when I was in Manhattan. The place oozes with wealth, prestige, trust fund kids, hedge fund managers, Fortune 500 CEOs, actors, artists, trophy wives, filthy Russians, Arabs, and Chinese. They speak a different language. They're speaking English, but when I was bussing their tables, mopping the floor, or changing kegs, I would understand nothing of their conversations. They might as well have been a different species. They certainly treated me as if I was something lesser than them, not quite as human. My luck changed, or so I thought, when the owner of the bar asked me to fill in as bartender for a private party he was hosting over the weekend. I jumped at the opportunity. Bartenders can make good money in New York City if they build up the right kind of relationship with customers. I practiced my cocktail recipes and wine pouring for the rest of the week and hoped that this might be my first big break in the city. The night of the party rolled round. I found myself behind a well-stocked bar with two other guys I'd never seen before. Both were around my age, and both looked like they had never worked behind a bar before either. This was my chance to stand out, I thought to myself. The owner of the bar arrived an hour after he told me the party would start. Accompanying him were a dozen men that all looked to be in their late 30s or early 40s. An aura of power and wealth surrounded all of them. These were men that had been born into elite society. They were accustomed to success. Everything came easily to them. The owner smiled at his friends, gestured to the bar, and said, "Have a drink, relax, reminisce over last year's games. We'll reconvene at midnight to begin this year's festivities." My bartending skills were never put to the test. Their orders were simple: whiskey on the rocks, gin and tonics, craft beer, and the occasional glass of wine. They were all deeply immersed in conversation. Occasionally, they would look over at the bar and gesture towards one of us. I assumed they were talking about how we were all obviously inexperienced bartenders. One of the men chatted me up, and the other bartenders up. He asked us about our childhoods, if we ever played sports, were any of us veterans of the Iraq-Afghanistan wars, and so on. I remember overhearing part of their conversations. It sounded like some of them were bidding on something, while others were placing bets. At midnight, the owner gathered everyone around the bar and began pouring shots. He called the bartenders over and said, "You guys deserve a break. Have a drink with us," as he filled shot glasses full of a dark liqueur. One of the men raised his glass, looked directly into my eyes, and said, "Udachi." The rest of us followed suit. Whatever was in the shot glass hit me hard. I felt the blood rushing towards my head, grabbed onto the bar to steady myself, and watched as my two fellow bartenders slumped to the floor. I looked up to see the men standing by the bar, watching us with wide smiles. One of them chuckled as he watched me struggle to remain conscious. He leaned over the bar and whispered into my ear, "Spukonoi Nochi," and then pushed me backwards. My head slammed onto the concrete floor and blackness enveloped me. I woke hours later to find that I was no longer in the bar. I found myself, along with the two other bartenders, sitting in the middle of a large barn warehouse. Rays of sunlight shone through high broken windows. I attempted to stand up, but found that heavy rope bound me to my chair. Out of the darkness emerged a lanky man with bleached blonde hair. He wore a balaclava on his face and a charcoal tailored suit. In one hand he carried a taser, and in the other he held a clipboard. When he was a few feet away from us, he paused, looked down at his clipboard, and said, with an aristocratic British accent, "Ah, yes, you three gentlemen have been chosen to participate in today's games." The bartender sitting to my right, I think his name was Brad, struggled against the ropes, tying him to the chair. He began to scream, but the blonde man took 2 quick steps forward and pressed the taser against Brad's neck. He said to Brad, "I will have to use this on you if you scream again, but I suspect that you will want to be in peak physical condition for the games today, so I highly recommend that you stop bloody screaming." Brad looked up at the blonde man, struggled against his bonds for a second more, but gave up, slouching back into his chair. "Splendid. Now, where was I?" said the blonde man. "Oh yes, now I remember. You three will be today's participants in our annual hunt." He paused for dramatic effect, and then continued. "We play for the highest stakes. If you win, we let you go free, with a tidy sum of money for your troubles. Of course, if you lose, well, your body will be unceremoniously buried under the concrete foundation of this warehouse." The other bartender, I can't remember his name now, began to sob. The acidic smell of urine stung my nose. The guy had pissed himself. The blonde man laughed and said, "Mr. Gordon, you have won your first bet. Subject B urinated after hearing what we have in store for him." A few chairs went up from the dark corner of the warehouse. I could just vaguely make out a group of men sitting on bleachers. The blonde man said lightly, "Now, let us begin today's games." 2 large men wearing hoods emerged from behind us, untied Subject B, and roughly pushed him out of his chair. The blonde man puffed out his chest and said, as if he were a professor lecturing his students, "Now, I'm sure the 3 of you have all read, or at least know the premise of the short story, The Most Dangerous Game." We all stared at him. Brad cursed under his breath. The blonde man continued, "Well, it's a true story. General Sarov, the hero of the story, was one of the founding members of our secret society. You 3 are lucky enough to be our huntees for this year." Brad cursed and struggled against his bonds. His face turned red and veins bulged from his forehead. Such a shame. You really are only hurting yourself with such childish behaviour, said the blonde man as he stepped forward and used the taser on Brad. Where was I? Oh yes, the rules. The game is now played with a few modern updates, as well as an urban twist. Right now, we are in the middle of an industrial park in New York City. We give you, the huntee, an hour head start. After 1 hour, your assigned hunter will give chase. Instead of hound dogs, he will use a GPS to track you. The GPS is built into a mesh vest, which the three of you are all wearing under your clothing. A small explosive has been sewn over your heart to ensure your compliance with rules of the game, and to keep you from going to the police. Your release from the compound will be staggered to discourage you from working as a team. The hunt lasts for 5 hours. If you are still alive at the end of the hunt, then we will deactivate your vest, and you are free to go on your way. Any questions? I remember wanting to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. The most dangerous game? The story my middle school English teacher had read us. And this clownish caricature of a man with his posh English accent. It all seemed too surreal to be true. I wanted to wake up and find myself back in my dingy little apartment in Brooklyn. I even pinched myself. I didn't wake up. Brad began to regain consciousness, while the other guy, Subject B, or whatever his name was, began to crawl towards the blonde man. Please, just let me go. I won't tell anyone. Just let me go. The blonde man raised a scented handkerchief to his nose and frowned at the man, grovelling before him. He called out to the bleachers behind him. Senor Suarez, you placed the highest bid on the right to hunt Subject B. Let's get this started, shall we? A young man of Spanish origin stepped forward. He wore a dark blue tracksuit, a small black backpack, and had a black stocking knit cap on. He eyed the snivelling Subject B and sniffed. This is the trash that have had 2 million euros for the right to hunt. I can hunt hardened criminals in Russia for a quarter of the price. My apologies, senor. But remember, you're also paying for the pleasure of manhunting in New York City. Perhaps a bit of fresh air will liven him up a bit, said the blonde man. He turned to the 2 henchmen standing to either side of Subject B and said, Throw him out. Subject B's eyes darted back and forth, first to the blonde man, then to Brad, and then me, silently pleading for help that would not come. They opened a door at the far side of the warehouse and threw the Subject B out of it. Start the timer, yelled the blonde man. Now, initiate the live stream. A large countdown clock appeared on the wall directly in front of the bleachers. A moment later, a live video feed of Subject B appeared next to it. Excellent. Let the games begin, said the blonde man with a dramatic wave of his hands. The timer began to tick backwards, but the Subject B refused to move. A few minutes passed, and he still hadn't moved. Senor Suarez began to curse in Spanish. Without warning, Subject B pulled off his shirt. Under it, he wore a black mesh vest with 2 thick dark squares on his chest. He began trying to pull it over his head, but it was too tight. The zipper on the back seemed to be locked. He picked up a piece of broken glass off the ground and began to saw at the vest. The blonde man sighed and said to Brad and me, Watch closely. There are sensors woven into the vest. Senor Suarez's curses became louder and more profane. I demand a complete refund. Of course, said the blonde man darkly. Moments later, there was a low thump, and Subject B fell to the ground. Whoever was holding the camera stepped forward to inspect the body. A grapefruit-sized hole could be seen in Subject B's chest. Glazed eyes stared up at the sky. The blonde man looked at me and motioned for the 2 henchmen to untie me. "You're next. I hope that you put up a better show, for both you and your family's sake." He pulled out a glossy photo of my parents, showed it to me, and let it fall to the floor. Fuck that. I knew that I should be scared, terrified even, but at that moment all I felt was pure rage. The unfairness of it all. I was a good person. I worked hard. Yeah, I've made some mistakes, but I've done absolutely nothing in my life to deserve this. Bringing my family into this mess was the final straw. I was determined to make it through the 5 hours and get revenge if the opportunity presented itself. The blonde man called forth my hunter, a man named Dmitri. Dmitri smiled at me and said in heavily accented English, "Good hunting, my friend." The henchman pushed me roughly out the door of the warehouse, and the hunt was on. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.